Um, Hello, everyone. My name is Bruno Esposito. I'm happy to be here, and thank you all for being here. My co-author, Anja Sautmann, also wanted to be here. Unfortunately, she couldn't due to personal reasons. Today, I'll be talking about adaptive sampling, adaptive experiments for policy choice, phone calls for home reading in Kenya. This is a brief overview of the structure of the presentation. So let's start with the introduction. So what are we doing here? We put adaptive sampling for policy choice to the test in a real-world policy choice problem in EdTech. So you see here that I've highlighted two phrases, adaptive sampling and policy choice. Let's talk about the second one first. Usually, the learning goal of a policymaker is the following. We would like to improve the outcome Y as much as possible. Which policy K out of multiple options should I choose? And this is what we define as a policy choice problem. Now, how can we answer this? Some researchers use randomized experimental designs, for example, an RCT. But RCTs are not an optimal strategy to satisfy or to answer this question. The problem with RCTs is that they put too much sample in low-performing arms and too little sample in high-performing arms. And the problem with this is that we are not interested in estimating the treatment effect of low-performing arms. Instead, we just want enough sample to be able to distinguish between the top-performing arms. So what is an alternative for this, or what is a strategy that actually answers the policy choice problem in an optimal fashion? Well, we can use adaptive sampling. In policy choice experiments that are carried out in waves, a more efficient learning is achieved with adaptive sampling, where the objective, once again, is to select the arm with the highest average outcome. And in order to do so, we use Bayesian updating to adapt the treatment arm allocation in later waves. As some of you may have already figured out, this is a special case of a multi-arm bandit problem with pure exploration, no exploration motive. What is the optimal learning strategy here? We would like a large share of units on high-performing arms. Which algorithm do we use in this case? We use experts on sampling, which was proposed by Casey and Sautmann in 2021. So, coming back to our work here, we want to test adaptive sampling in a real-world application. What is our application? Well, we work with Bridge Kenya, New Globe, in testing interactive voice response calls to encourage parents in Kenyan primary schools to read with their children. And the policy question that we would like to answer is, what format should the call take? There are three main goals in this work. First, we would like to address practical and conceptual challenges of implementation in policy settings. Second, we would like to explore the performance of adaptive sampling in a short time horizon. And this is important because usually in all these papers, we talk about the asymptotic properties of the algorithms, but we would like to see if this works, if this actually works in a short time horizon. And third, we would like to inform the policy choice problem at hand. Let's talk about a framework, or the framework. The setting is the following. We have multiple policy options and multiple waves. What are these waves? There are just IID sample draws from the population. We have a potential outcome with certain average, which we are going to denote as theta k, and we have an average for each treatment arm, k. The selected treatment arm by the end of the intervention is denoted by K star, and the true best arm, which is unknown to us, is denoted by K1. We define policy regret as the difference between these two. we need to define an objective. And in this case, the objective that we are defining is that we would like to maximize welfare after the intervention. So after we've carried out the intervention, we are going to choose that treatment arm that minimizes the posterior policy regret. Now, that's sort of intuitive, right? But the main idea of the paper comes at the start of the intervention, in which we would like to select or use a sampling strategy that minimizes expected policy regret before we've done anything. Next, we have to choose an algorithm. And in this case, the algorithm that we select to update or to generate our treatment allocations is expression sampling. As I mentioned, expression sampling was proposed in 2021, and it's also used in a couple, or has been used in a couple papers. What are we doing with expression sampling? Where we are Bayesian updating our prior beliefs about theta k, and this yields a posterior probability optimal of arm k. These are what the literature calls Thompson shares, and then the actual assignment shares that we use for each treatment arm are a function of those Thompson shares. Finally, we have to choose the size of the wave, denoted by n, and the number of waves in the intervention. We discussed this in the paper. Unfortunately, I don't have much time to do so, but please take note that this is an important part in the policy for the policymaker designing this intervention. Now into the actual IVR experiment. Our implementer, New Globe Bridge Kenya, operates more than 100 primary schools in Kenya. They would like to test IVR calls to engage parents, and overall, they would like to promote reading at home. There's plenty of research of policy effects of reading at home interventions, so we would like to design a similar intervention. Ideally, we would like to cater exercises to child's reading levels. And in fact, New Globe tests oral fluency in exams. Unfortunately, this data is very noisy, has lots of missing values, so it's not perfect, it's not great. Therefore, we are going to we use 3 leveling approaches, or when we define these treatment arms, we're using 3 leveling approaches. The first one is based on the result of these ORF exams, and we have 3 different levels: emergent, intermediate, advanced. The second arm is intermediate for all, and here we are arguing, hey, maybe ORF is not such a great measure, let's do intermediate for all. And third, parent choice, in which the parent decides what is the level of the exercise. And here we argue, hey, perhaps the parents know better, right? A second dimension of these treatment arms are the delivery formats. So in a first case, the parent leads the conversation or the exercises, and in a second case, the IVR, this automated call, leads the exercises. In total, we have 3 times 2, that's 6 arms. And overall, we have 2 calls per week, 4 exercises per call, and 9 calls in total in a fixed sequence. There are a few constraints in these interventions. First, there's only 1 first grader cohort in 2021. Second, the Kenyan school term has only 10 weeks, which are split 5-5, midterm and end term. And the cost of development is high, unfortunately, in this case. So we can only do a 5-week intervention per wave. So at the end, we decided to do, with the policymaker, we decided to do 2 waves, where the second one is adaptive. And we are going to be targeting call engagement. We also argue in the paper that we can estimate the effect of on ORF, on reading fluency, using a more complete data ex post. So I said that we are going to be targeting call engagement, but how do we define this? And this is defined as whether the parent has answered to the call and also they have started exercises via keystroke. This data is immediately available for all contacted numbers. So as you can imagine, it's relatively easy to build a data pipeline that automatically analyzes the data and generates assignment shares. Our sample has 100 schools, 3,000 phone numbers. We do an stratified adaptive random assignment in 2 waves. As I mentioned, the first one is or has equal shares. We have no idea which is the best treatment arm. And on the second wave, we start using adaptive sampling. In particular, we use this algorithm, exploration sampling. We also have a control group to estimate effects on ORF, which is discussed in the paper. Let's talk about estimation and results. We are running a hierarchical logistic regression model for engagement with school random effects. And after wave 1, we see the following table. Here we are showing the allocation shares or the treatment shares for each treatment. These are the proportions allocated to each treatment arm on wave 2. And as we can see, T1B has the highest proportion. This means that on wave 1, T1B was the most successful one. In this case, we have the distribution and point estimates of the betas of the model, which are just a monotonic transformation of the probability of a success call. The more to the right, the more successful is the call. Here we see something very interesting. That is that T1B is the highest or has the highest engagement. And not only that, it has the lowest concentration or the lowest variance out of all the treatment arms. Why is this? Because as we learn through the waves, we are allocating more sample into the high-performing wave or high-performing arms, which is making us more certain that we are able to distinguish between the top treatment arms. Particularly, compare the distribution of T1B and T2C. We realize that T2C has a lot of variance, and that's because there are so few samples allocated to this treatment arm because it's low performing. We don't really care about it. Furthermore, realize that if we had to run an RCT, perhaps we wouldn't have been able to distinguish between treatment T1A and treatment T1B. This table has the same message, but in numbers. The success probability of T1B is 8.4%. The posterior expected policy regret is 0.02. And in common terms, this is the loss from our wrong choice in terms of engagement probability. And also we see that we are quite confident about our results because there is a 93% probability that T1B is the optimal treatment arm. Furthermore, we also rule out 3 waves, three treatment arms. Just after 2 waves, we are able to say, hey, T1C, T2A, and T2C are not have 0 chance of being the optimal treatment arm. We can rule them out. There's an additional discussion in the paper, which is the choice of experimental design. These are very interesting points that unfortunately I'm not able to talk here due to the time constraint. We talk about what if we target ORF directly. We talk about how to select number of waves and the gains from these additional waves. We also compare experimental sampling and RCT. And finally, we also provide some results for, instead of doing a Bayesian approach, we do a frequentist estimation and inference, of course. So overall, adaptive sampling looks like it works even for a few waves. It's a method to quickly weed out less attractive treatment variants. And there is a range of implementation questions that have been addressed, such as modeling, research design, estimation. For the IVR call results, we see that parent-led intermediate level calls appear to have the highest engagement with a 93% probability. And this is a relatively simple to implement intervention, has a high upside potential, and furthermore, this is all automatized, so it can be easily replicated somewhere else. That would be it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So I'm thinking about like what do we lose by using that strategy? And it sounds like when you do undersampling on the arms that are particularly less effective, T2C, is there a time dimension here? Like at the beginning of phase 2, I'm equally likely to sample from each arm, but the moment that T2C looks worse and worse, I start sampling less. And I'm curious if there is a temporal effect of a treatment. Maybe T2C was worse off at the beginning of the T2, but gradually through time, through some seasonality effects, the effect of T2C might improve. And through undersampling this arm, maybe I'm sort of missing out some form of a temporal effect. So I'm curious, like, can we still get that causality batch certificate here, or is it like, are we losing something by using these adaptive strategies?
Thank you. It's a great question. So one of the assumptions of this strategy is that we are drawing IID draws from the population across waves. So these temporal effects should be ruled out. We are assuming that there are no temporal effects. And one may say, okay, but hold on, in reality, this may not be true. So one way to bypass this and always at least consider other low-performing treatments is to set a lower bound on the treatment shares, which is something that has been done in the 80 paper. I believe they are actually doing that, in which, for example, the lowest that the treatment share can be is 5%. Or certain number. That way, we can mitigate that possibility. Thank you.
Very interesting talk. I guess ultimately we're interested in what they learn. How does this method extend to, say, compliance issues as is normal in econometrics?
Sorry. Can you repeat that?
So say we wanted to compute the test scores after this. Can you even incorporate that into this framework? I mean, first parents have to comply, and then you need to measure the local average treatment effect.
That's a great question. In the paper, we argue that it is possible to capture also the effects on ORF, which is reading fluency. It's not as neat or perfect as an RCT, but we believe that we have enough identification power to actually capture those effects those effects on ORF. So I would argue that yes, it is possible, but we need to be a bit more careful. For example, in the case of ORF, we need more data than I'm currently showing here. So in the paper, we actually run a panel, which is we see these students across time for midterm evaluation and end-term evaluation. And furthermore, we also include a control group, which here is not shown because the control group just has 0 engagement because they didn't receive the call. So those are small details that you need to incorporate into a study in order to be able to capture that treatment effect on another metric, which is the one that you're not targeting. Thank you.
Thanks.
More question, it's time to speak again.